The afternoon sun in New Mexico hung low and angry over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and burnt orange. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on the asphalt of Highway 491, making the air shimmer in waves of distortion. It was the kind of heat that made tempers short and patience thin, the kind that dried out the throat and cracked the lips. Elena drove her battered sedan with the windows down, the air conditioner having given up the ghost 50 miles back. She pulled into Dusty's Stop and Go, a lonely gas station that sat like an island in a sea of sagebrush and red dirt. The neon sign above the pumps buzzed with an erratic, dying hum, the letter QUIS flickering on and off. Elena was exhausted, her nursing shift at the county hospital having run 3 hours overtime due to a pile-up on the interstate. All she wanted was a cold bottle of water and enough gas to make it the last 40 miles home to a quiet apartment. The station was mostly empty, save for a rusted pickup truck parked near the air pump and a stray dog sleeping in the shade of the ice machine. The isolation of the place usually didn't bother her. She had grown up in the desert and respected its silence. But today, the silence felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on her arms stand up. She stepped out of the car, stretching her stiff back, wincing as her joints popped. She swiped her card at the pump, the machine groaning as it processed the transaction with agonizing slowness. While the gas began to flow, she looked toward the convenience store, a small stucco building with barred windows. Through the glass door she could see the clerk, an old man named Earl, who spent most of his time reading paperback westerns, ignoring the world. Walking toward the store, Elena noticed a bicycle leaned against the wall. It was a cheap mountain bike, the chain rusted, clearly well used and loved by someone without much money. It belonged to a kid she had seen around here before. A quiet teenager named Lee, who lived in the trailer park a few miles down the road. Lee was a gentle soul, skinny and awkward, the kind of kid who got lost in the background of life. Inside, the air conditioning was a blast of frozen relief. Elena shivered as the sweat on her neck cooled instantly. She walked to the cooler, grabbing a bottle of water, her eyes scanning the aisles. She found Leo standing in the candy aisle, counting a handful of coins with intense concentration. He looked smaller than his 15 years, wearing a faded band t-shirt that hung off his bony shoulders. He was trying to decide between a chocolate bar and a bag of chips, his brow furrowed as he calculated the tax. It was a scene of innocent normalcy that made Elena smile amidst her fatigue. "Hey Leo," she said softly as she passed him. "School out early." Leo jumped slightly, then smiled shyly when he recognized her. "Hi, Miss Elena. Yeah, just ... getting a snack before riding home. Make sure you drink water," she advised, the nurse in her taking over. "It's over 100 degrees out there." "I will," he promised, finally selecting the chocolate bar and moving toward the counter. Elena waited behind him in line, watching as he carefully placed his dimes and nickels on the counter. Earl counted them with agonizing slowness, grunting his approval when the total was correct. Leo took his prize and headed for the door, his step light, happy with his small purchase. Elena paid for her water quickly, wanting to get back on the road. She stepped out of the store just as Leo was unwrapping his candy bar near his bike. The sun was blinding after the dim interior of the shop. Just then, the peace of the desert was shattered. The roar of a modified diesel engine cut through the air like a chainsaw. A lifted black truck, covered in mud and aggressive bumper stickers, peeled off the highway and screeched into the lot. Dust billowed up, choking the air, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. The truck didn't park in a spot. It pulled up directly in front of Leo, blocking his path to the road. The engine revved once, a threatening growl, before dying. The driver's door flew open. A pair of heavy work boots hit the pavement. Elena felt her stomach drop. She knew that truck, and she knew the man who drove it. It was Brock. He was 22, a high school dropout who had peaked on the football field 4 years ago and had been angry at the world ever since. He was big, thick-necked, and mean, the kind of bully who had never grown out of pushing people around. Brock stepped out of the truck, adjusting his baseball cap, a smirk plastered on his sunburned face. He wasn't alone. A friend was in the passenger seat, laughing at something on his phone, but Brock was the main threat. He locked eyes with Leo immediately, like a predator spotting a wounded gazelle on the plains. "Well, look what we have here," Brock boomed, his voice echoing off the metal canopy of the gas pumps. "Little Leo. The trailer park prince." Leo froze, the chocolate bar halfway to his mouth. He lowered his hand slowly, his shoulders hunching in a defensive posture that spoke of years of this exact treatment. "Hi, Brock," he mumbled, looking at the ground, hoping to become invisible. "Is that my chocolate?" Brock asked, stepping closer, invading Leo's personal space. He smelled of stale beer and chewing tobacco. "I think you bought that with my money, didn't you?" I bought it with my own money," Leo stammered, clutching the wrapper tight. "I earned it mowing lawns." "Lawn money," Brock mocked, snatching the candy bar from Leo's hand with a quick, violent motion. "That's cute. But see, there's a tax for using my gas station." Elena watched from near her car, her hand frozen on the door handle. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She wanted to look away, to get in her car and drive home to safety. It wasn't her fight, it wasn't her business. But she saw the fear in Leo's eyes. It was a pure, terrified helplessness that broke her heart. She remembered her own younger brother being bullied years ago, coming home with bruises he wouldn't explain. Brock took a bite of the stolen chocolate, chewing it with open-mouthed exaggeration, crumbs falling onto Leo's shirt. "Not bad," he sneered. "Got anything else in those pockets?" "May be enough for a soda to wash this down." "I don't have anything else," Leo whispered, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. "Please, Brock, just let me go. Let you go." Brock laughed, shoving Leo backward. Leo stumbled, his back hitting the rough stucco wall of the store. "I'm not holding you. You can leave whenever you want. Just pay the toll." Brock grabbed the handlebars of Leo's bike. "Nice ride. Be a shame if something happened to it." He lifted the front wheel and slammed it down, bending a spoke. "Stop it!" Leo cried out, reaching for his bike, but Brock shoved him back again, harder this time. Leo slid down the wall, landing in the dust. The friend in the truck laughed, leaning out the window. "Get him, Brock. Make him cry." Elena felt a surge of anger that overrode her fear. It was a hot, white flash of indignation. This wasn't just bullying. It was cruelty for sport. It was a grown man terrorizing a child because he had nothing better to do with his pathetic life. She let go of her car door. Her knees were shaking and her mouth was dry, but her feet started moving. She walked across the cracked pavement, her nursing shoes silent on the ground. "Hey!" she called out. Her voice sounded thin and reedy in the vast desert air, but it was loud enough. Brock turned around, looking surprised to see anyone else there. He squinted at Elena, sizing her up. A small woman in scrubs. Not exactly a threat. "Go back to your car, lady." Brock dismissed her, turning back to Leo. "Adults are talking." "I said stop it," Elena said, stepping between Brock and Leo. She stood barely 5'4", looking up at the 6-foot bully. She was trembling, but she planted her feet. Brock looked down at her, an ugly grin spreading across his face. "Or what? You're gonna check my blood pressure?" "Get lost, nurse." The air between them crackled with tension. Elena could smell the tobacco on Brock's breath, see the pores on his nose. She was terrified. She knew that if he wanted to, he could hurt her badly. They were miles from the nearest police station, and Earl inside the store wasn't going to help. "Give him back his bike," Elena said, her voice steadier now, "and leave him alone. He's a kid, Brock. What is wrong with you?" "You know my name." Brock chuckled, looking amused. "I'm famous. Look, this little rat owes me. I'm just collecting." "He doesn't owe you anything," Elena snapped. She turned slightly to check on Leo. The boy was scrambling to his feet, dusting off his jeans, looking at Elena with wide, panicked eyes. "Leo, get on your bike and go. Now." "He ain't going nowhere," Brock growled, stepping around Elena to grab the bike frame again. He yanked it, and the pedals scraped against Eleanor's shin, drawing a line of blood. "Ow!" Elena gasped, stumbling back. "Oops," Brock said, feigning innocence. "Shouldn't stand in the way of traffic, lady. Now move before you get hurt for real." Leo looked at Elena's leg, and then at Brock. "Don't hurt her," the boy yelled, finding a sudden spark of courage. "I'll give you the bike. Just leave her alone, see?" Brock laughed, looking at his friend in the truck. "The kid knows the score. He's generous." Elena grabbed Brock's arm. It was a foolish move, instinctual. "You are not taking his bike." Brock looked at her hand on his arm with genuine shock, then rage. His face turned a dark shade of red. He shook her off violently, sending her stumbling back against the ice machine. "Don't touch me," Brock shouted, his posture shifting from mocking to aggressive. He balled his hands into fists. "You think because you're a woman, I won't smack you? You're intervening in my business." Elena leaned against the cold metal of the icebox, catching her breath. She had crossed a line. Brock was unhinged. She looked around the empty gas station, praying for a car to pull in, for a state trooper, for anyone. But the highway was empty. Just heat waves and asphalt. "You're pathetic," Elena spat out, refusing to cower. "Bullying a 15-year-old. Your mother must be so proud." That struck a nerve. Brock stepped forward, looming over her, his shadow engulfing her. "You shut your mouth," he hissed. "Or I'll shut it for you," Leo screamed. "Leave her alone." And threw his half-eaten candy bar at Brock. It bounced harmlessly off Brock's shoulder. Brock turned slowly toward the boy, his eyes dead and cold. "Okay," he said quietly. "Now you're both gonna pay." He reached into the bed of his truck and pulled out a tire iron. It clanged against the metal side of the pickup. The sound was distinct, sharp, and terrifying. Elena's blood ran cold. This had escalated from bullying to a felony in seconds. She moved to shield Leo again, spreading her arms. She was the only thing standing between a weapon and a child. Then a sound cut through the heavy air. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a car. It was a low, rhythmic thunder. A deep, bass-heavy rumble that vibrated in the chest. The sound grew louder rapidly. It was the distinctive, syncopated potato of a large displacement V-twin engine. A Harley-Davidson. Brock paused, the tire iron hanging loosely in his hand. He looked toward the highway entrance, annoyed at the interruption. The friend in the truck sat up straighter, looking nervous. A lone motorcycle turned into the station. It was a massive machine, all black powder coat and chrome, gleaming under the dying sun. The rider sat high in the saddle, wearing a black leather vest over a dusty gray t-shirt. He didn't speed. He didn't rev the engine aggressively. He rolled into the lot with a slow, controlled menace. The gravel crunched under his thick tires as he navigated the lot. The rider pulled the bike up to the pump furthest from where the altercation was happening. He kicked the kickstand down with a metallic clank that echoed in the silence. The engine died, and the sudden quiet was deafening. Alina watched him, hoping, praying. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick-limbed. He took off his helmet slowly, revealing a shaved head and a face weathered by sun and wind. He had a thick goatee and eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. He hung the helmet on the handlebar. He swung a leg over the bike and stood up, stretching his back. Then he turned. He wasn't looking at the gas pump. He wasn't looking at the store. He was looking directly at Brock. Brock shifted his weight, trying to look casual, trying to hide the tire iron behind his leg. "Just a biker," he muttered to Leo, probably just passing through. But the biker didn't turn to the pump. He adjusted his leather vest. Alina saw the patches on the back clearly as he turned slightly. The top rocker read New Mexico. The center patch was the winged death's head, a Hell's Angel. Alina knew the reputation. Everyone in New Mexico did. They were outlaws, men who lived by their own code. Usually that meant trouble. But right now, looking at the tire iron in Brock's hand, trouble felt like a lifeline. The biker reached into his saddlebag and pulled out nothing. He just closed it. He took a pair of leather gloves out of his back pocket and slowly, methodically, pulled them on. He tightened the strap on the left wrist. Velcro rip. He tightened the strap on the right wrist. Velcro rip. Then he started walking. He didn't run, he didn't shout. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait. His boots thudded against the pavement. Thud, thud. He was walking straight toward them. Brock's bravado began to crack. He took a step back, away from Alina and Leo. "We're busy here, man," Brock called out, his voice cracking slightly. The biker didn't answer. He didn't even acknowledge that Brock had spoken. He just kept coming, a silent juggernaut closing the distance. The distance between the pumps was only about 50 feet, but it felt like miles. Every step the Hell's Angel took seemed to suck the oxygen out of the air. The sunset cast his long shadow forward, so it touched Brock's boots before the man himself did. Alina pressed Leo back against the wall, shielding him with her body, but her eyes were glued to the approaching figure. She noticed the details now. The scar running down his left forearm, the 1% diamond patch on his vest, the utter lack of fear in his posture. Brock looked at his friend in the truck for backup. The friend was frantically rolling up the window and locking the door. Brock was alone. "I said we're good," Brock yelled, louder this time, trying to assert dominance. He brought the tire iron out from behind his leg, holding it visibly. "Don't come any closer." The biker stopped about 10 feet away. He stood perfectly still, hands hanging loose at his sides. He tilted his head slightly, as if observing a curious insect. He reached up and removed his sunglasses, hooking them onto his vest. His eyes were pale blue, piercing and terrifyingly calm. There was no anger in them, only a cold, hard promise of violence if necessary. "You holding a weapon, son?" the biker asked. His voice was deep, like gravel tumbling in a dryer. It wasn't a shout. It was a conversational tone that was somehow more frightening than a scream. Brock gripped the tire iron tighter, his knuckles white. It's for protection. These two were harassing me." Alina gasped at the lie. "That is not true. He was hurting the boy." The biker's eyes flicked to Alina for a millisecond, then back to Brock. He ignored the lie completely. He took a step forward. "Stay back." Brock swung the iron in the air, a clumsy, nervous gesture. The biker took another step. He was now within striking distance. He looked at the tire iron, then looked at Brock's face. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a wolf's smile. "You gonna use that on me?" the biker asked softly. "Or is it only for women and kids?" Brock hesitated. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. Hitting a nurse was one thing. Hitting a patch-wearing member of the Hells Angels was suicide. Even if he won the fight, he would never be safe in New Mexico again. The biker took one final step, invading Brock's personal space. He smelled of leather, gasoline, and dust. He towered over Brock, despite being roughly the same height. His presence was simply larger. "Drop it," the biker said. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man who expected to be obeyed. Brock's hand shook. He looked at the biker's heavy leather gloves with hardened knuckles. He looked at the empty highway. He looked at his locked truck. The metal tire iron slipped from his sweaty palm. It hit the concrete with a loud clang that signaled the end of his power. The sound of the metal hitting the ground seemed to break the spell. Brock slumped, his shoulders rounding, the bully evaporating to reveal the coward underneath. He took a stumbling step back, hands raised in surrender. I didn't mean anything," Brock stammered, his face pale beneath the sunburn. "Just joking around. You know how it is." The biker didn't look at the tire iron. He kept his eyes locked on Brock. "I don't know how it is," he said flatly. "Explain it to me." Brock opened his mouth, but no words came out. He couldn't explain cruelty to a man like this. The biker reached out, his hand moving fast. Brock flinched, expecting a punch. But the biker just grabbed the front of Brock's shirt, bunching the fabric in his fist. He pulled Brock close, until their noses were inches apart. "You like scaring people," the biker whispered. "You like making people feel small." "No," Brock squeaked. "Then why are you shaking?" the biker asked. He held him there for a long moment, letting the fear soak into Brock's bones. "You aren't a wolf boy. You're just a dog that barks at cars. And today, you caught the wrong car." He shoved Brock backward. Brock tripped over his own feet and landed hard on his backside in the dirt. He scrambled backward, on his hands and feet, like a crab, desperate to get away. "Get in your truck," the biker said, pointing to the vehicle. "And if I ever see that truck in this town again, I'll dismantle it. With you inside." Brock scrambled to his feet and ran to the driver's side. He fumbled with his keys, dropping them once in his panic. He ripped the door open and threw himself inside. The engine roared to life. Brock didn't look back. He threw the truck into reverse, tires screeching, and then slammed it into drive. He peeled out of the gas station, kicking up a cloud of dust, disappearing down the highway as fast as his engine could carry him. And silence returned to the gas station. The only sound was the humming of the neon sign and the heavy breathing of Alina and Leo. The biker watched the truck disappear. He stood there for a full minute, ensuring the threat was gone. Then, slowly, he turned around to face Alina and Leo. Alina braced herself. She didn't know what to expect. She had seen him handle the bully, but he was still a dangerous stranger. The biker took off his gloves, the Velcro ripping again. He tucked them into his back pocket. His face softened slightly. The coldness in his eyes thawed just enough to show humanity. He walked over to where they stood against the wall. He stopped in front of Leo. The boy was shaking, clutching his bike. The biker looked at the bent spoke on the wheel. He reached down and touched the bike. With a surprising gentleness, he checked the frame. "It's rideable," he rumbled. "Just a wobble." He stood up and looked at Leo. "You okay, kid?" Leo nodded, his eyes wide with awe. "Yes, sir, good." The biker reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. He held it out, for the wheel, and another candy bar. Leo stared at the money, then at the man. He took it with a trembling hand. "Thank you," he whispered. The biker nodded. Then he turned to Alina. He looked her up and down, checking for injuries. He saw the scrape on her shin where the pedal had hit her. "You got guts, lady," he said, his voice respectful. "Stupid guts. But guts." Alina let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, A nervous laugh escaped her lips. I didn't think. I just... I couldn't watch. Most people do watch, the biker said. That's the problem. You stood up. He looked back at Leo. He placed a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. It wasn't a threat. It was a grounding weight. Listen to me. Men like that, he nodded toward where the truck had vanished. They only understand one thing. They feed on fear. Today, she cut off his food supply. Leo looked at Elena, really seeing her for the first time, not just as the nice lady from the store, but as a warrior. She saved me, Leo said. She bought you time, the biker corrected. You got to learn to stand tall, kid. Even if your knees are shaking. Especially if your knees are shaking. The biker patted Leo's shoulder twice, then stepped back. Next time, he said, looking Leo in the eye, you won't need me. And you won't need her. Because you'll know that guys like that are hollow inside. He turned and walked back to his bike. The sun had set now, leaving the sky a deep indigo. He put his sunglasses back on, even though it was dusk. It was part of the armor. He mounted the Harley, kicked up the stand, and thumbed the starter. The engine roared to life, shattering the quiet once more. He didn't wave. He didn't look back. He just pulled out onto the highway, a solitary red taillight fading into the vast New Mexico darkness. Elena and Lil watched him go until the sound of the engine was just a ghost on the wind. Are you okay to ride home? Elena asked, her nurse mode engaging again, though her voice was softer. Yeah, Leo said. He looked at the $20 in his hand. He looked at the direction the bully had fled. He stood up straighter. He wiped the dust off his shirt. I'm okay. Elena got in her car and followed Leo at a distance until he turned into his trailer park, safe. The story spread through Gallup and the surrounding towns. Brock was never seen at Dusty's stop and go again. Rumors said he sold his truck. But the real legend wasn't about the bully. It was about the nurse who stood her ground, and the angel in black leather who backed her up. Whenever Leo told the story, years later, he didn't talk about the fear. He talked about the moment the engine roared, and the realization that even in the middle of nowhere, you're never truly alone if you have the courage to stand.